Hi, I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone.
and we're your hosts for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to season 2, episode 4, to be title finished. To be finished.
Wow, 4 episodes already.
Yep.
That
Well,
happened
5
quickly.
technically, but we did 2 parts, right? 3 is the
Right.
double. So technically we're at 5, but that doesn't matter. So since we were both experiencing this, we'll continue on about flow because the flow seems weird. Even before we started this episode, that was the mutual
Yeah.
consensus.
Yeah, we both arrived with, hey, what's up this week? Like, what is going on? And it's been even a little bit longer than a week, but certainly this week has just been busy with things. I was explaining earlier that the way I see it is that the worldview that you have and all the different facets of it
Mhm.
is becoming shattered. At least that's my experience of how this is happening. Where, something that I believe to be true or I think I know is just blowing up like a balloon popping, and
Mhm.
it's just beneath that is a different reality or a different perception of what we call reality, let's put it that
Yeah.
way. And that shifts everything when your understanding of what is happening and what you're looking at changes like that. Who and how you are changes in response. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of disruption and recreation going on right now.
Yeah.
That's what I've experienced
Yeah.
lately.
Well, because it makes me think, right? Because I had already discussed the idea of when I let that bug out of the house, how stupid it would have felt to have killed it, which before really wouldn't have bothered me either way. Like, I mean, I always tend to side on if I can just let it out quickly, I'll do that. But this took a little bit of effort, and I was thinking like, but I would have felt really stupid. And so this whole beginning of disrupt or changes to the way of viewing might have been for a few weeks now or even longer. But I've noticed that yeah, there's a lot. I've had conversations recently too where people are not necessarily the people are becoming more aware, but I am definitely becoming more aware.
Yeah, and I think the way these things happen, it starts and initially you sort of notice a little bit and you're just like, huh, okay, and then keep going and keep going. And then more and more and more comes in. And this week has just been nuts. There's so much going on that you cannot possibly ignore it.
Yeah,
And that's the point we've reached. But I think you're right. It's been going for a while now. We're just at sort of crescendo stage,
yeah,
or at least what I think is crescendo. There could be a whole lot more than that coming,
yeah.
and
Well,
I'll just leave that to happen naturally.
yeah. Well, I was going to say probably because we have practices that make us more sensitive to this, so maybe we're picking it up first. You know?
Yes, yeah, because I'm hearing people make comments that
Mm.
suggest they're experiencing something similar, but they might not be noticing it in the same way or sort of labeling it in the same way
Mm.
as we do. And that's and some people are working towards that and some really aren't. And the whole thing is so interesting. But in human design, gotta
Mm.
mention this, in human
Yeah.
design, Ra Uru, who back in the 80s, who gave us human
Hmm.
design, he kind of wrote that all down, delivered
Right.
it to people. Um, he picked or he divulged, I should say, 2027
Right.
is the year where things change dramatically. Now, that doesn't mean nothing, nothing, nothing 2027.
Right.
It means there's a build up, and then
Mm. Yeah.
the notable big changes that history will pay attention to is in 2027. So we are not far from that. And I
No.
think the signs have been building for like years now, and more and more and more. It's kind of gathering speed, I would say. So 2027 is going to be a hell of a year. And I can't imagine. I think your experience of it is going to depend on your awareness and what you bring into it. So people coming in from a negative, angry space are going to experience something that's extremely negative and angry. People who
Right.
are coming in from an open to receive, more positive space are going to experience that. That's what I think we're getting to.
It's interesting that you say that. But before we continue that, you know what I forgot to mention, right? It's time to speak as witches and wizards do.
Well, here we
My
go.
favorite line.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, you still got to say it.
Yeah. But to tie it into something we were discussing beforehand, I had decided, okay, I'm going to do, because I was listening to people tell stories about how once they embraced everything they do, everything came easier. So I thought I'm going to finally really do and shake this whole not embracing the wizard title thing. And it's been interesting in the sense of, or something interesting really happened in the, normally like when I do something like that and I say, okay, I need some guidance, I prefer doing it through dreams usually.
Okay.
And then, I got that night, it was crazy enough, but, well, you know what? I'll just share the whole scenario and then I'll point out my thing just because it's fun. So I said, okay, what do I do going forward now that I'm going to embrace this title, right? And then the whole night, all I dreamt about was I had signed up for classes at university, and then those classes either get canceled or they switched teachers or something. I could never find them. I either had to go back and register and then it wasn't there available anymore, or the classroom got moved and I could never find it. So that was the whole night. It was just dreams of, not being able to find. And it was classes on whatever magic and magic basics and stuff like that. And I couldn't find the class to save my life, or it got canceled, or the teacher. Like, it was just big chaos after another. And then so the next day, and this will come back. This won't come back, but we could discuss it later if it matters. I end up going, okay, well, I got some tarot cards around. I'm going to do a reading instead and see, right? And so then I got the Fool, which is perfect, the beginning of a journey, right? You know, and then that was followed by, and I thought, well, okay, I got it. Yes, I'm trying something, embrace something new. Fine. I'm at the beginning. And then I pulled Temperance to kind of have like a bit more detail. And okay, Temperance, don't do things like you did, or at least learn to curtail all the stuff you were doing before or the negative things you were doing. Perfect. It's awesome. Still doesn't tell me though what I really want to know. And then so I pull the Hierophant or the Pope, depending on your deck. So then that's like, be ready to learn from someone. Maybe a new teacher will show up. And then from then, my understanding was, well, maybe I've got a new human teacher showing up because I got to learn how to do the normal world stuff, but from the human perspective. And so I'm like, okay, great. Maybe I've got a new teacher coming. But then I thought, okay, I need more guidance, like because the dream still bothered me. So then that night, I said, okay, I need some more dream guidance. But then as I'm sitting there saying that, I'm going like, you know what? One of the reasons why I like doing it through my dreams is because sometimes the dreams are fun, and it's a diversion from my daily life. Because like right now, everything's about growth and doing new things, and it's frustrating. So sometimes when I have a dream, it's just more fun to be in the dream, right? And that was the only reason I wanted really the guidance in the form of a dream, because to live the wisdom versus just getting it handed to you,
Mm-hmm.
So I realized I'm like, this is the only reason I'm doing it. And so I had some pleasant dreams related to the topic of learning and whatever. And then I got up in the morning, it's like, yeah, that was just purely for me. I wasn't seeking wisdom. I just was seeking an experience. So like that showed up in my head. And I'm just like, all right, I guess I'm already starting the journey, because now it's like, okay, prune away all the old behavior, you know, like temperance. Okay, well, temperance said, get rid of the old stuff that you're doing that's not helping. And like, okay,
Right.
well, seeking dream answers instead of like just doing it consciously. Well, yeah, it's more of a thing I do to play than it is to actually really do anything serious. But okay.
Yes. And really interesting that your dream was you kept trying to find these classes and
Hmm.
something happened to them all the time, because I had a dream
Hmm.
that was I was moving the whole time, and I'd be on a train, and then I'd step off the moving train onto another vehicle that's moving, and I was moving from place to place, transport to transport, in all kinds of ways, and people kept saying, "What are you doing? You're crazy." And but it was non-stop, and when I woke up, I was exhausted because it really felt like I had done all of this action. It was like James Bond would have been pleased with himself. There was so much daring do and, leaping from one thing to another. And I don't know that there was an end point or a goal in mind, nor was there a conscious, I want to do this. It was simply what had to be done.
Yeah.
And it was just rolling like that. But wow. And the whole thing was punctuated by people just saying, "What are you doing? You're crazy."
Yeah.
And that was it. And then, like I said, I woke up absolutely shattered. I was so tired. I needed another sleep. I didn't get one, but that was how I felt. It was whoo. And that was the same kind of thing of I'm not getting there. It's
Yeah.
like wherever it is I'm going, I'm just not getting there.
Well, that's the thing, right? So there's probably even stuff for people like us where it's listen, you've got your starting place, but now there's new things that need to be done, and you can't do the same things over and over again. And yeah, and if there's a big change coming, which
Oh
could
yeah.
be what we're feeling, then yeah, the old stuff we're doing isn't going to be because it's a change, so things are going to be different. So we got to pick
Yes.
up our skills
Uh,
for the difference.
And the one thing that was constant in that dream was change,
Hmm.
change and movement. And it was always forward,
Hmm.
but I didn't seem to be getting anywhere, which is like just fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny because the next time I dreamt the whole education thing had been sorted out, but it wasn't by conventional education. Like it wasn't by going to an institution, and it was just more of a specialized training instead
Well,
of
that
going.
makes
It'd be
sense.
more like going to a trade school instead of going to a university or a college.
Oh, School of Practical Magic. I like
Yeah.
it.
So
I like it.
yeah. So if I'm,
I'd sign up for that actually. Like that
uh,
sounds cool. I'd teach a class. I'd take a class. Like
mm,
anyway.
yeah. So it makes me wonder. So there's probably in the future there's probably a need for more practical stuff. And like I said, I have been looking to do more practical things. And I do have it is part of my practice to do practical things. Like I said, the well, you can't see it here, but in the symbols that I usually well, actually this symbol here,
Mhm.
not my mark, but the circle with again, people at home can't see this, but listening can't see this, but well, you see it in the it behind me is a virtual background of the podcast logo and the symbols on it and the title, so people know. And the faded part in the back represents what I like to call your vis anima, which is just basically some people call it chi, some people call it your life force, whatever. Vis anima is a butchering of Latin to get life force, but it's backwards.
Right.
But yeah, so that symbol, right? And then the triangles on the side represent the alchemical elements. So I do actually have a practical uh,
Hmm.
part of my practice, but I haven't been using it because I've been doing all this other stuff, new learning, teaching. So the
Right.
practical things have been gone to the wayside. But now that I'm recovering from burnout, I know a big part of it is being in present in the physical world again. So it's probably a good
Mm.
timing. It makes me wonder how in shape I got to get for the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And the practice, I think, will present itself to you. It just does. The trick is to see
Well,
it
and
when it
that's the
shows
thing, right?
up. But you have skills in that department, so I think I'm
Yeah.
sure you will see it as it comes to you. I'm doing a lot of work with trance right now, and um that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild stuff. So Milton Erickson
Yeah.
Dr. Milton Erickson is the person who began the whole trance thing. And some of his students took the language patterning from his work and
Right.
made NLP. But
Okay.
that's a more superficial version. Like it's still
Mhm.
powerful, but it's only language. It's not inner sort of deeper inner work. So the trance work is the other part of Milton Erickson's
Mhm.
work. And it's quite a journey that you go on doing this, and you can facilitate other people going on trance journeys too, and you get a very different understanding. So if you're talking about flow and
Yeah.
awareness and all of those things, trance is a great way to get there. Now, do you use, plant medicine and what have you? You
Mhm.
can. I don't, because I prefer not to have that agent affecting where I'm going. But that's a
Mhm.
personal choice. I know plenty of people that do
Mhm.
use different types of plant medicine. Um, Personal choice. But yeah, trance, really cool.
Yeah, it's funny now because you're saying that, right? So I think you're bringing us to the flow of the program, and I think it is the old "where does wisdom come from" idea. Like for me personally, right? I haven't done it really lately, which is one of the reasons because I've said before, right? Like I used to go into trance to get information, but now because I've gotten so used and so practiced at it that the minute I start just even telling myself I'm going to do it, I get the answer.
You're in.
So it's like
Yeah.
I don't even get the fun of going into a trance anymore. It just, but yeah, but trance is still helpful, especially when you don't know what you're looking for, or when you have no expectations. As you say, going in curious.
Curiosity is great for that. And sometimes you can help other people with it too.
Mm-hmm.
An instance that comes to mind is I had to go to the courthouse for possibly jury duty,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't give me much notice, and I had a bunch of appointments and so on. So I was
Yeah.
sort of basically going to say, hey, could I have, a different date? And when I got there, people were lining up to be seen and to,
Mm-hmm.
be given their spot and so on. And there was this pretty young girl, early 20s, I would say, wide-eyed and petrified,
Mm-hmm.
like she was just giving off freak out
Right.
vibes. And she was hyperventilating. So I saw this and I thought, oh, I got to go over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of went over and started chatting with her, hey, first time, this kind of conversation. And she was just, her breathing was frantic. So I matched her breathing
Mm-hmm.
and then started to bring that down because I did not want to stay there. And I
Yeah.
used my voice to kind of bring her with me into a calmer space. And the whole process took maybe 2 minutes tops. But she went from hyperventilating and freak out
Right.
to being very calm, breathing normally,
Mm-hmm.
and looking kind of surprised. And my stuff had been dealt with, and I could go. So I said, I'm leaving now. Nice to have met you. And she
Mm-hmm.
just kind of looked at me with big eyes and said, thank you.
Yeah.
But she didn't know why. She knew something had happened though. But that
Yeah.
was using trance
Yeah.
to just bring her down. And there was no point in me telling her what I was doing because she was too dysregulated to hear me.
Right.
But the voice was able to, I just used that as a tool to kind of bring her into a calmer space. It was all her space, and I just kind of left her in that calm
Yeah.
zone and quietly left. So, that kind of thing can be very helpful too. It's not something I would go around using on people willy-nilly, but
Yeah.
this girl was going to pass out. Like she
Yeah.
really needed some help. So
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You say that, and it's funny how much you can regulate someone else by letting yourself function as a template for what the other person needs to do. Or,
you have to match them
or
first.
yeah, you got to match them, and then you can
Match them and then bring
model the
them
behavior.
in.
That's what it is. Model the what needs to be done.
Yeah, but if you match the person first where they're at and then bring them
Yeah.
where they can kind of function better, that's done it a couple of times and it's been really good. Like it's great for panic attacks too. But you just have to get in quickly and
Mhm.
start, and you don't want to stay there too long yourself because otherwise your body starts thinking, oh, hey, what are we panicking about?
Yeah.
And you don't want to go in the freak out mode. But
Yeah.
That's an example of how that can be used in a real world situation that, is tangible.
Yeah. And it's funny that you bring up panic attacks because I get them occasionally, but I've noticed how much they're a learning tool.
Hmm.
Like when I first started getting them, they'd last for hours, like because you give into the fear.
Well,
But I didn't realize that's what they were. Like I
it's
just,
convincing.
yeah, like
Convincing.
the world will never be the same again. Nothing will ever be better, and you're like your brain is just feeding you, and if you let it happen, right? Now when I get them, they last like 30 seconds, but because I realize what it is. But it's funny because now when I see someone have a panic attack, I'm like, okay, I know what's going on in your head because I get them too. But by the same token, I know now how easy it is to actually get out of them. Like it's funny. You get that where it's almost painful the kind of panic it gives you, where it's almost physically painful to have it. But then when you realize, oh, my brain is panicking, and then like what I started doing was, okay, well, what's my brain like when I'm not panicking? Because I'm not constantly in a state of a panic attack. So whatever, I know my triggers are actually pretty weird, but they're just basically existing is almost my panic what triggers a panic attack. So you think, right? At some point you have no choice but to adapt and learn something because the existential fear of existing, like, what's non anyways, without getting anyone into it or triggering someone else with it. So because my triggers, I can't do anything about them. I can't run away. I have to sit there and exist in it. I'm like, well, this isn't productive. And when I realize it, I spend most of my time not panicking over this or not having the anxiety over it. So it goes away. Like once my brain remembers what it was like to not be panicking, it goes, oh yeah. And then it regulates itself.
Right.
And
And
like,
another tool can be thinking of trance still.
mm-hmm,
If you're getting that panic going, and you feel it
mm-hmm,
going within, following the trance method of dropping in
yeah,
and searching, where is this? Because you might think it's in your brain, but it might not be in your brain. It might be somewhere else that it's originating. So you go find it and
mm-hmm,
soothe it and then sort of work your way back again. And I've done that too. And that's really been helpful if you nip it in the bud before it
mm-hmm,
becomes this massive freak out. But you
yeah.
can feel it building and you're going there. You can drop in really quickly and just sort that out before it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
And it can be
Well,
surprising sometimes where that fear is lodged.
yeah. And it's funny, right? Because I also have another method I use, which is I don't fight it. I say, okay, if you have something to teach me, fine, let's have the panic attack. If there's nothing, but if you have nothing to teach me other than just, like a kicking off a panic attack, then you're done. You're out of here. I don't need you. But if you're going to teach me something, it's fine. And then usually, once I say that to myself, it's like goes away. It's like I've got nothing to teach you. And I said, well, you're allowed to be here if you're teaching me something. But if you're not teaching me something, then you go. Because
Which
that I
seems
learned
fair.
because it's you fear things you don't know, but if
Yes.
once you know what it is, it's like once a horror movie reveals the monster, a lot of that fear of buildup goes away because now your brain can formulate plans on what to do. Your brain can say, okay, well, the monster has a humanoid shape, so it might be like a human, so I can start applying logic to it like I would a human being. Or if it has like an animal shape, well, then, oh, it's got big snarly teeth. Okay, don't get bitten. Already I have a strategy. So then your body starts to calm down and starts to think, oh, what can I do? Something like that, anyway. But yeah, so when I tell it, the quickest and easiest way to get rid of it is saying, okay, what do you have to teach me?
Right. There's so many approaches, and I think testing them out for the yourself.
Yeah.
Anybody that's listening to this that is resonating with what we're saying, feel into what appeals to you. Do you want to go looking for it and
Right.
see where it's lodged, or do you want to like challenge it to teach you something, or what are you going to do with this experience? Because your approach to it will make all the difference. And
Mm-hmm.
we have so many tools. It's a question of what's going to work for that particular instance, that particular day, and what are you prepared
Yeah.
for? What are you
Yeah.
prepared to deal with? Because if you say well, if you're going to teach me something, then you can be here. You better be ready because
Yeah.
if it's going to teach you something, it's likely to be big. And the thing with
Mhm.
transformation, with transmutation, with just going with the
Mhm.
flow, is the flow isn't always smooth. The flow isn't always easy. That word sounds like a very gentle river,
Yeah.
but think river with rapids,
Hmm.
okay? There are lumpy bits
Exactly.
in there, and there are parts that go fast, and there are parts that get you snagged up, and you might fall out your boat occasionally, but it's a whole thing, it's a whole adventure. So flow isn't necessarily easy,
That's right.
but it's all moving in the same direction. Might not always feel like it,
Mhm.
but you're heading somewhere. And a preparedness to handle whatever comes is necessary. So if you're not feeling like you could handle being taught
Mhm.
something, try a different method that
Yeah.
day because you got to be prepared for it. You got to brace
Well, yeah.
yourself.
That's why I have multiple strategies now. Like, because
Right.
me, I know what triggers it exactly. It's not plain old existing. It's existing but feeling trapped when I have no
Mm.
power to do something. So usually, if it does show up, usually it shows up when I'm taking a shower because it's like, well, I'm wet, so I can't just, take off. I have to like, even if I still have to get off, dry myself off and stuff. I'll be dripping everywhere. So that's when it decides to show up. And then I'm like, well, okay, well, I got to finish the shower. Like I'm in here. So that method works too. I'm like, well, if you can wait for me to finish my shower, giver, you have my attention. And then usually it goes away too with that one.
So that's combating irrational fear or
Mm.
seemingly irrational
Yeah.
fear, right? It's not attached to anything with practicalities
Right.
and with a logical brain.
Mhm.
And those two things, like in behavior analysis, you would call that incompatible behaviors,
Mhm.
which is a great way to stop a behavior you
Yeah.
don't want. So even in science, that is scientifically
Right.
a pattern as well, right? So it's very cool. I love being able to pull all these things in and sort of say, yeah, that's scientific, and yeah, that's over here, and yeah,
Well,
it's good
that's the
stuff.
thing, right? Like nothing we're saying is divorced from science other than, well, like, you know what? But even I would argue if you look at theoretical physics and you look at mysticism, it's not hard to see the connections. Like,
Not at
okay,
all.
if you believe we exist in a what do they call it? A simulation. All right. Well, that's mystic thought right there. We're in a dream. There's the whole dream analogy of we live in a dream. But then if you think there's a code to the universe, well, then the code can be deciphered, the code can be used, modifications can be made. Like there's a lot in at least theoretical science that matches back, or theoretical physics that matches back to mysticism. So,
Quantum mechanics
yeah.
is waves and
Mm-hmm.
particles, field of infinite possibilities. What you focus on is what you materialize, if you will. It will be your experience. That is, it's quantum mechanics, it's quantum
Yeah.
physics, is right there. That's what I've just kind of put in a very tiny nutshell.
Yeah.
So these things are connected. People mistake quite often what cannot be seen with the eye doesn't exist. But
Mm.
it's like you can't, generally speaking, hopefully, you can't see the air unless it's
Right.
polluted, right?
Yeah.
But
Or it's
you
hot.
know it's
But
there, otherwise
yeah.
you're not talking to us right now. So, that's one example that people often use. But it's interesting where we will allow something to be believed but not seen. Think
Mm-hmm.
religion. People
Yeah.
do that all the time. And where it becomes problematic. So it's kind of interesting to see how people will define that for themselves. But yeah, what we're talking about absolutely relates to science. It's
Mm.
just, you have to be paying attention. And I mean, look at the field of psychology too.
Mm-hmm.
Field of psychology, check out Jung anytime. Like tarot, archetypes, whole nine yards. This guy was totally tuned in,
Yeah.
and absolutely he was playing in the field of infinite possibilities, no question. And his stuff is really interesting to read and to learn. I mean, go for the lighter books because he gets awfully technical and detailed, and I don't think that's necessary, and certainly not for most people. But yeah, Jung, really interesting stuff.
It's funny because it makes me think of when you say that you don't have to go into the deep technical stuff. But yeah, like and to add to the wisdom thing, we as a species adapt by modeling other things. So we learn from animals, we learn from flows of rivers. Like when you think about it, right? A lot of indigenous traditions are like even to learn medicine, right? Some of it, like even the name of the medicine, like if you're practicing elk medicine, well, it's because it was elks were observed doing this.
Right.
So, and to add to it, like animals are practicing medicine, whether we realize it or not. Like they don't have, they don't have official boards and they don't have certifications and stuff, but they hand down traditions to themselves on what plants are best to lay and when you have an infection and or when you get
Hmm.
cut or attacked by a predator, they'll roll in plants. That's how we get to find a lot of our medicines in the beginning of our journey to that. And like it's not just us, right? Other animals learn from us too. Like our behavior is influenced by our environment. Which actually, you know what? I'm going to take a second on that one. So inspiration. We are constantly seeking inspiration from our environment. That's how actually magicians can fool you into their mind reading tricks. There's the joke of I want you to think of it. Is it you can't see it by making a triangle with my hands there, but it's like so it's think of a shape, you know. First thing that's going to come to your mind is a triangle because you're seeing my hand in the shape of a triangle. You do it subtly, but because your brain is looking for inspiration, it'll take any cue it can from its environment. That's the beginning of how you have, your spiritual inspirations. You're always paying attention and you're listening. You just have to refine your ability to pay attention to that side of life. But that's how it is. And then if I ask you to put that shape in another shape, just put it in another shape. Odds are you're going to say circle because I made a circular motion.
Right.
So it's like it's inspiration comes from stuff like that. Well, it's because I've listened to podcasts where people are trying to figure out how divination works, how science from how people are getting their inspirations for things like artists and stuff was the last thing I was listening to that podcast about. They're talking about how do artists get their inspiration, and they weren't quite there realizing just how much we draw from our environment. They were going for the more supernatural portions of it, but it's like, and it's true, you do like because they were talking about muses and stuff. That was the one of the things they
Hmm.
were talking about, and it's true. Like you can have a spirit whisper to you the idea, or you can pick it up from other people because other people are spirits too. So you get, but you can also draw from your environment. You can see something in your environment, even if you're not consciously aware of it, that sets you off and gives you the inspiration. Like I said, we do it with animals. So,
An interesting group to talk to about inspiration are authors,
mm-hmm.
fiction authors.
That was a big group identified in the talk.
Yeah, that's quite something. Now, full disclaimer here, my husband is an author and he writes science fiction and he also writes fantasy. And I've never seen him outline a book or plot the way it's going to go. In fact, when you ask him, is this going to be a series or a standalone book? He's like, I don't know yet. And he just writes, like he literally channels those books. And so he's never had writer's block, for example, because he's not trying to force the story. It comes and it flows. And it's literally that the inspiration, all his childhood science fiction shows and all of that, that's all in there, absolutely, no question. And he'll put little homage here and there
Mm-hmm.
to these various places. But
Right.
the story as it comes just flows in as a channel. So the inspiration for that is vast, and yet it's also environmental because it puts together everything he's experienced so far, particularly those childhood science fiction movies and stuff. That informs how his stuff shows up, even though what he's writing is definitely original, but that's where it's kind of inspired from. And the fantasy as well, like he didn't write fantasy until fairly recently and then did a trilogy,
All right.
and the trilogy is amazing. Like that, I prefer fantasy, so for me I was very excited, and it's really so well written. I'm like, oh my god, you need to keep doing this. But he doesn't know what the next one's going to be, and maybe it can
Right.
be over there, maybe it can be over this way, because it's whatever comes, right? So authors, I think, tend to be really open to universal
Hmm.
inspiration, if you will. Anybody who's really writing good stuff, like J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter series,
Hmm.
she just sat down and started writing, and she just went for it. And the next thing you know, she's got this amazing series that's all over, you know, acclaimed left, right, and center.
Yeah,
People couldn't read them fast enough. They couldn't make a TV series out of them fast enough. Like,
yeah,
just this
yeah,
thing was huge. Where did
yeah.
that come from?
Well, that's the thing, eh? And that's kind of what I want the listeners to understand, because again, first and foremost, right, the podcast is about when people are awakening to learn how to live that life and see what it's like. Well, when you draw from your environment, not just like you get from the material as well as the spiritual world, your inspiration for things like going a spiritual awakening doesn't mean you divorce yourself from the material world.
No, you have to
You
be
learn
in
the
the
lessons of the
material
material
world.
world as well, but now you also have the spiritual world also teaching you lessons.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole point of being here is that you're in the physical
Right.
world. That kind of is the point, and there are experiences here that you can only have if you're in physical
Mm-hmm.
form. The key is to reconnecting with that vast everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think we're separate and isolated. We think we're individual, and it's one of the favorite words out there, right? Be an individual and da da da, and that's cool. But at the same time, what do you mean? And is individual then separate from everything else, or is it separate from everyone else? That's a whole rabbit hole to go down. But I would invite people to consider, when you use words like that, or
Mm-hmm.
when you think about yourself like that, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What are you actually separating from in order to be individual? And is that helpful or harmful to you? And I don't think people stop to consider that, but it's part of the awareness and the awakening that you figure out, like, where you actually are in all of this, and how separate do you want to be.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting thing. Like I always tell people, I like to usually always tell people, regardless of individual or we're all one, you're in the same medium. So whatever you do affects everybody else to some
Right, like
degree or
throwing a
another.
throwing a stone in the middle of a pond.
Yeah.
The ripples are going everywhere. It's not just where the stone is.
Yeah. Everyone in the pond is still affected by what you're doing. So even if the idea of being one isn't something that rings true with you, you still have to behave in that. You have to take that idea under consideration, whether or not, it's funny. And I don't know, well, bleh, let the flow pass for a second. Okay. I treat the idea of reincarnation the same way. Whether or not you believe you reincarnate, live like you reincarnate. And I say this for a very specific reason. Anything you do in this lifetime, polluting planets, starting wars, future you has to deal with this when you come back. You're leaving
Right.
that world for future you. So, if nothing else, live like you reincarnate. Pascal's wager, but for reincarnation. If you come back, you got to live with the shitty world you left.
Right. And that's rather hugely important, I would say. Yeah, I'm also, my view on it is whether you think you're coming back or not. And I'm always curious about the people who think not, because what's the point?
Right.
If you're here for one shot and done and you're not coming back in any way,
Mhm.
shape, or form, then what was the point of that?
Yeah.
And I'm open to hearing it, but I haven't heard anything
Mm.
convincing yet at all. So assume that we come back
Mm.
in some form or other, then it's safe, I think, to add to that that you're here to learn something.
Mm.
That's the point. You keep coming. Every time you come back to the planet, it's like going to a new class. So
Yeah.
you've come to learn a set of something that you didn't learn before. So what are you here to learn now? How can you learn it to the best of your ability so that you don't have to repeat all the stuff you've done this time?
Right.
And some of us were really ambitious about how much crap we wanted to deal with. So some of us were very greedy about that
Yeah.
and have had a lot.
Hmm.
So do you really want to have to do that again? Or would you like to get the lesson from it now so that you can move on? And
Right.
I find that to be a very helpful way of looking at things because then any things that have happened to you that would be put in the category of trauma, things that have, you know, really not been good. Just you
Hmm.
did not have a good time with whatever that thing was. So you have options with this. You can be a victim and say, this is terrible and my life's blighted because of this thing.
Hmm.
Or you can get into focusing on blame mode. This person did this thing to me. Da, 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 da. Neither of those things move anything forward. But if you can say, okay, that was something, and I could have done without it, but given that I
Yeah.
had it, what do I get from it? What do I learn? And that way you can transmute that experience into something positive that you take forward. And that's the difference between thinking it's one shot and done and there's no point
Yeah.
to, do I really want to have to do all that again? And we all have stuff in our backgrounds that we would put on the list of do not repeat, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't want to have to repeat that experience, then learn the lesson. And it can take going back to behavior analysis, you find behavioral patterns repeat on cycles all the time until the person learns to step out of that cycle and do something differently. Well, that's
Right.
that's a microcosm of you in the universe. Like you're going to keep having those experiences until you get the lesson. So if you have something on repeat that's unhelpful or unpleasant, then you might want to stop and look and say, okay, all right, already. What do I need from this? How
Yeah.
many people do you know with relationships, for example, who will have the same relationship over and over again with different people?
Hmm.
And others will say, wow, why do you always choose the guy that's emotionally unavailable, for example?
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for that. And you got to find out what that reason is so you can stop doing it. You have to learn the lesson.
Yep.
That's you can extrapolate that as far as you like to go because it keeps working.
Yeah. It's funny because it makes me think of, if I could give advice to my younger self, I wouldn't, because my younger self has to go through the lessons. And I say that having gone through them, and I'm now on the other end, so I don't have that stress from those lessons. But I bet you my younger self would think I'm one hell of a jerk for not warning them of the things I'm
Right.
going to learn.
Yeah, I've been asked that question before. What advice would you give to your younger self? And what usually comes to mind is buckle up, buttercup.
Yeah.
But it's even that I don't think there is any advice I can give my younger self. It's
Well,
just like, kid,
that's
you
the
were
thing, right?
greedy. You signed up for a hell of a lot, and
Yeah.
it's going to be big. But that
Right.
that would have affected how I showed up for everything. So,
Well, that's one of the main reasons for it. And the fact is, now that I'm done that experience, I'm not feeling that stress anymore. Because when you're on the other side of your stress, like when you've gone through whatever it is your ordeal, when you're on the other side, you see the lessons, you're like, oh my God, I'm better off for having gone through it. Now, the you that has to go through it is not going to be excited to not have that information, but you know, it brings you somewhere. I had this discussion actually with a nephew of mine. He was at a point in his life where he's like, you should come and talk to me and my friends and really give his wisdom. And I'm like, these guys are at an age where you have to find that wisdom for yourself, you know. But then having gone through that period now, he's like, oh yeah, we did figure out stuff for ourselves. And we are like, you can't always tell everyone how to do things. They have to see it for themselves so that they can learn how it works for them. Because they're like,
mm,
we're coming into adulthood. How do you be an adult? I'm like, I can't tell you how to be an adult. You have to learn who you are as an adult. It actually leads me to another question. I see it online. Now that I'm 30, what do I do? And my answer is what you taught yourself to do. That's the simple answer. Up until, as you're growing up, you learned a bunch of things to do. That's what you do now.
that's an interesting question, and I would love to talk to somebody who's asking it. because
Hmm.
what I want to know is what do they think they're supposed to do,
Right.
and why do they think they have a supposed to, and if they could set their own agenda, newsflash, you can, then what would the agenda be? Like, it's such an interesting question because it's disempowering. It's
Hmm.
very much, I'm going to give you the ability to tell me what I need to do.
Right.
And at 30, that should not be a thing.
No.
At 30, you're just sorting yourself out, hopefully a
Hmm.
little bit, and ready to experience things. So asking somebody what you should do, I'm going to say the only answer you can ever get from the best of intentioned people
Right.
comes from their lens. And
Yeah.
so it's what they should do when they're 30.
Hmm.
It's nothing about the person they're telling it to. This
Right.
is one of the problems with listening to other people's advice. So talking about inspiration, which we were
Hmm.
earlier. Okay, there's so many directions I want to go in at once with this, but one of the things is, let me bring in human design for a moment. You have the crown center and the ajna, which is the mind. Those two centers in the head can be defined or they can be open. Now, if it's open, meaning you look at your chart and it's white, it means that the energy with those centers is not fixed, it's not constant, and it draws from the external environment. Those centers will draw from the people around you who have those centers defined, which means definitely don't believe everything you think because it's not your thought, it's what you're getting from somebody else.
Right.
And if your crown is undefined, which it's either attached to the mind or it isn't, if it's undefined, then you are literally open to everything around you, seen and unseen. You are open to receive other people's opinions, other people's inspiration, all kinds of things. The trick is to not believe it's yours and to actually examine what you're getting.
Hmm.
And one of the examples I like to use for that is politics. Yeah, I love going to politics because everybody says you shouldn't talk about it. So
Yeah.
100% I'm going there. And
Right.
if you hang out with, let's use the US version right now.
Mm.
If you hang out with a bunch of Republicans, then your viewpoint is likely to become very much right wing, very much Republican oriented,
Mm.
whatever that means to that group you hang out with. Now, if you move, say you move state and you go live somewhere else that's very, very Democrat, and you start hanging out with people there, there's a very good chance that you will start to shift and be more Democrat in your thinking. Now, what's right and wrong is completely immaterial. It's who's around you
Yeah.
is going to be influencing how you think. The key that so many people are missing at the moment is to examine your thoughts. Do you actually think that? Do you like thinking that? Do you want to take that on board? These are all optional. And when you're looking for inspiration, it is your environment. So choose your environment wisely. Don't be in one that's inspiring you negatively or is feels like it's sapping you.
Yeah.
Some places and some people will take your energy, whether they mean to or not. I mean, I think we've mentioned energy vampires
Yeah.
before,
We did.
but we did, yeah.
Mhm.
And, some people are just that way. They will literally drain you and you'll be so uninspired, you'll forget what it's like to be inspired. So think about these things in your environment and where are you putting yourself that's not helpful? Where would you rather be? Go there, go find that other place
Yeah.
and be there and just notice the difference for yourself. Write a journal every day or something and see if you can see your thoughts shifting and
Yes.
and how your inspiration changes. There's no right or wrong here at all.
Yeah.
That's
You,
that's not the point.
that's actually a YouTube problem. So I don't hear it talk about it as much anymore, but I don't listen to the same things I used to listen to on YouTube. But at one point, there was a problem with YouTube. If you started off, you were left, but you felt disenfranchised, but you were politically left. You could find
Okay.
enough videos that would drag you over to the political right. But if you stayed down that rabbit hole, eventually the videos would bring you back to the left.
Ah, It is possible enough to go so far right that you
Yeah,
become left, and so far left you become right.
but it
That's
was
absolutely
an algorithm
seen.
issue at one point. So the algorithm would take people from being politically disenfranchised on the left to all the way over to the alt-right pipeline and back.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And yeah, it literally is dependent on what you're surrounding yourself with and what you're putting into your head. So, for example, people watching news stations,
Hmm.
which really we need a new name for those because they are not news stations, they're
Right.
propaganda stations. But when you look at them, they are biased very heavily in a given direction, depending on who they are. And if you only watch that, that's the sort of misinformation that you're going to
Right.
receive. And it seems real
Hmm.
because that's their job, is to make it seem real. That is their point. They are magicians more than most magicians, however. And
Yeah.
I've been in situations where there's been a protest going on, for example, and cameras come in and they focus on this group of people. There's maybe a dozen people, and it's not a very big protest, but they're being as loud as they can be. And then on the news, a few hours later, it's the cameras have managed to make it look like it's this massive event.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I was there. I'm telling you, there was like a dozen, maybe 15 people. It was not this big thing, but they present it as though it is because it suits their agenda to get people listening. That's the people who aren't thinking about what they're receiving, and they're not being very um, choosy about what they're filling their heads with. Now, if you think about it, if everything you watch and listen to and talk about is negative and angry, how's your day going to be?
That's right.
And how's your
Welcome the word.
decision making going to be? Can you make a good decision from that headspace? Hell no. Of course you can't. So I'm not saying everything is sweetness and light. I'm just saying be aware of what you are creating and curating for yourself, because that will show up in your life. And if you want a miserable life, then knock yourself out and watch CNN.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's funny, eh? When you said bringing parties into it. So there was a leadership race about, was it pre-COVID? And it was for conservative, the Canadian Conservative Party on the federal level. And I was watching. So CPAC here in Canada is the Canadian Political Affairs Channel, not the conservative whatever in the States. Not the
Uh-huh.
same. It's a different CPAC. So they were having a call in, and they had finished the leadership race. The leader got picked, and so someone called in, and you could tell they were diehard conservative. They're like, "We have the right leader, we have the right policies. We're going to take the next election." And I was like, "I'm like, okay. Here's first of all, I watched the leadership race for the Conservatives that year, and I'm like, I agree with none of the policies, and I find the leader completely uncharismatic." But I'm thinking like, but I'm saying that as someone who doesn't normally vote conservative, but I don't vote for the big parties because they've all you know disabused me of the notion of they were really functional as
Uh-huh.
parties. Like, so I'm listening to him talk, and I'm like, you're seeing this solely from one perspective. If you were to take what you've just seen and when talk to people of different political stripes, you'd see that your leader is not going to win anything, and you would realize those policies most people don't care about. So,
Right.
but the
And
guy was
I
excited, and I was like, good for you, you're excited, but it's like your perspective is not shared by the majority of Canada.
and I have to say, politically, I've been looking at the UK because I'm
Mm-hmm.
originally from there, Canada because I have also lived there,
Mm-hmm.
and US, I'm here currently.
Mm-hmm.
I look at all the parties in those places, and there isn't one I want to vote for. Like, not on any side, not the corruption of morals and ethics is so intrinsic in each of
Right.
these parties, every single one of them, that none of them are fit for leadership. But that is a whole other thing. However, it puts me in a really interesting position because particularly in the US, right, it's
Mm-hmm.
very polarized here.
Right.
And somebody will start yelling about politics. And I'm like, okay, you're not convincing me at all. And I
Mm-hmm.
am somebody who is so truly on the fence. I am the freaking fence.
Right.
So, how would you persuade me to vote in your party's favor? Like, what can you tell me that makes me want to do that? And it is so interesting to see people's responses to that because it stops them in their tracks. They don't know what to do now
Hmm.
because they can't yell at me anymore. There's no point. I just took the
Right.
point away. And they don't, this is key because this is a sign that somebody has not been paying attention to their own thoughts. They don't know what to say to me in
Right.
order to have me want to vote for their party. They can only tell me why not to vote for the other guys, but they cannot tell me what is good about their own chosen people. And this has happened so many times now.
Mhm.
I haven't had anybody yet come up with something that's even an attempt at convincing. And that's so interesting. I've had a few people say, "Oh, I'll get back to you."
Right.
I'm like, knock yourself out now. Go think about your thoughts. Like,
Hmm.
where did they come from? Do you actually feel them? Like, is this really where you're coming from? Or is this taking inspiration and
Right.
thoughts from other people and thinking it's your own? And with social media, we do that a whole lot too. But it's so
Hmm.
interesting if you present yourself as someone who is like completely undecided, so undecided it's not funny, like watch people try to come up with why.
Yeah. You
They,
know,
they
it,
they're so used to yelling at each other and just coming in with the energy of fight that they don't know how to critically analyze and help you to see that their people are the good people. Nobody's done it
yeah.
yet.
It's funny you say that. And I'm not bringing this up to jump in on the debate with this particular question, but I went through an interesting journey with this question. There was the question of who would you rather be alone in the woods with, a man or a bear? I don't know if that one got into your, yeah. So at first I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm looking at it from a woman's perspective, there's probably men have done terrible things. Like the statistics, like men tend to be overtly, or at least noticeably more overtly aggressive. So yeah, and a lot of times when you see someone alone in the woods, it's because it can be because they're escaping the law, because that does happen. So I'm thinking of this question, I'm going, yeah, I can see why women are choosing the bear. But I'm thinking like, but most men aren't like that. But then someone asked a question to drive the point home and said, okay, instead of a woman, imagine it's your daughter. And the first thing I thought to myself was, well, then I'd rather she meet a man, like not a bear. Because like when you take the context differently, right? I'm like, if I look at the odds are the bear will think of her as defenseless and eater have now shot up. The odds of a bear eating her have gone higher, and the odds of a man doing something to her have gone down because whether some people don't like to accept it, one of the things about men is that young girls make us feel protective. So being as a guy, I'm like, well, if I see that position, if I see a little kid in the woods, even if it's not my kid, it doesn't matter the race or whatever of the kid, I'm going to become more protective. Whereas I might have an adult said, you're on your own, the child will automatically make me feel protective. So then I'm thinking, well, the odds are now, you've now changed the odds. You've changed because even male behavior, even
What if
aggressive
it's
male,
an
right?
what if it's an adult daughter?
Well, yes, because then it's an adult woman, right? And then you're back to that. But I would still feel more comfortable with a male at that point because the male at least has a chance of helping. Whereas the bear, odds are the bear's not going to do anything to help, right? But
This
when you
is
think from the child, it changes my perspective when the child is added in.
This is
Yeah.
one of those questions that there is no right or wrong, but
No.
there is a whole lot of interesting
Yes.
because it's the reason behind the choice.
Mm-hmm.
So if a woman says, would I rather meet a guy I don't know or a bear, which is how the original question was, it's
Right.
somebody you don't know the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather meet a guy you don't know or a bear? Many women have had experiences that
Right.
suggest the bear is a safer option,
Mm-hmm.
and that is telling. But it's also it's a difference of your experience and your perspective.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I don't actually have an answer for that one.
Yeah. Well, my reason for bringing it up is that because there's a lot of nuance to the answer. You've only
Absolutely.
had good, like, because from the answers I've seen, women who have had, like, pretty much just majority of their interactions with men have been good, they'll answer the men. But I've also seen women who have been sexually assaulted choose the man as well, because
Oh,
they only see their perpetrator as the person to be feared. They don't view the whole group that way.
interesting.
Well, because you can look at it, most emergency services are done by men. So in the front line of being in danger. So if you're being attacked by a man, there's a good chance that a man is also going to be there to protect you or to take you out of the situation. So depending on how you look at it, your nuance could bring you to say, well, okay, this particular man. But I'll say this though, my ultimate solution to these things are blame the person who did the thing, because that's how you're going to solve the problem. The person did something to you. Well, if you seek justice for yourself and you get that person specifically punished or whatever, then you now know, like, hold the people responsible for what they did, and then you don't have to worry about the whole group of them, because the person who actually put that fear in you is the one that got caught, is captured.
That's not always doable though.
No, it's not always doable. That's true.
It's
But as
often
a
not doable.
general way of doing things, look at who is responsible for what happened. Because if you hold the people who did the thing responsible instead of a group, one, it's easier to manage life. That's the first thing. You live with less baggage that way, and it
Yeah,
helps you understand the good versus. But that's how to put it, because this is we're kind of in the whole thing about wisdom, knowing what's truly dangerous and what's not truly dangerous, right? Because okay, I want to make the example of learning how to drive offensively and defensively. Like in Ontario, anyways, like usually the driving school programs are called defensive driving.
hmm,
But you can learn to drive offensively as well. And driving offensively can get you out of a lot of situations as well that you can't get out of when you're using just defensive driving. But you wouldn't normally drive offensively because that would cause more accidents than not. But once you're in a situation, right? Once you're in a situation that requires you to take risks when you're driving, then knowing how to take the risk with your driving is important. So knowing
interesting.
when to take a risk and not to take, or it's like the teaching your kids not to fight. Okay, but there's going to be a situation where that kid can't get out of the fight. So do you teach them to fight? More than likely, even if you don't want them to fight, just so that they know how to deal with the situation or know what to expect from a situation.
I think, yeah. So going with the fight thing, the last
Yeah.
thing you said, and having had kids, um, it's the key there that people often miss is when to fight.
Mm-hmm.
The when is so important.
Yeah.
If somebody produces a knife, are you gonna use all your techniques to fight them? No, run away. They
Yeah.
have a knife. Like, why would you stay there? If somebody's upset you and you're angry, are you gonna fight? No, because then you're a jerk. There's a lot of sort of when is the key.
Yeah.
How to, I think everybody should know how to,
Mm-hmm.
simply because if you don't, you have no option.
Yeah.
It's exercising your options is important.
Yeah.
And going back to the bear versus the man in the woods, etc. So much the answer, so much depends not only on the experience of the individual who's answering, but how
Mm-hmm.
deeply they're thinking about it
Yes. Yes.
and whether they're examining
Mm-hmm.
their response or not. And that is something that a lot of people are not doing, and it's
Mm-hmm.
problematic. They
Yes.
don't
That's
examine.
exactly it. And that was the goal of my mentioning it.
There you go.
That because
Because if
like
they don't examine what they're saying, they spout something that somebody else has said. And if you ask for clarification on that, they're likely to get mad because people usually do that when they don't have an answer. But they also just don't have an answer. And then you know that thought isn't going very deep, if
right.
at all.
Well,
So,
that was the whole idea of it. It was the because when I was asked the question, like when the question was posed, well, if it was your daughter, like, speaking about a child, I'm like, well, listen, between the two of them, the odds are better that the man will be able to take care of the girl than the bear will, because the girl's going to need help. She's a small child, so she's going to need help. So then it changes the whole scenario, right? Because now you're looking at this child's going to need help. Not like an adult woman can find her way out of the woods. If she went into the woods on her own to begin with, odds are she'll get herself out of the woods as well. So you wouldn't have to intervene. But a child is going to be a different situation. So then suddenly now, now you're not thinking she's in the room with like with like Jeffrey Dahmer or some other, the worst of that representations of men, right? Now you're thinking, okay, well now I'm hoping for the better representation of men because this scenario has changed.
And context is everything.
Yeah.
And that is also something that's often missing
Mhm.
from people's narratives. And basically, a lot of the problems that are currently coming up are people who take things at face value,
Mhm.
make them mean something, and then spout it as truth.
Right.
And that is a very shallow functioning, and you're really not in touch with any kind of flow at that point. That's actually managing to avoid flow by doing
Yeah.
that. You're avoiding connection by to anything, to other people, to the spirit world, to the energy of the universe. Like, you're not connected to any damn thing when you're functioning at that level. You're just like avoiding it, it's like
Right.
hiding in the cave someplace. And the problem with that is there are repercussions to everything we do. And if you're holding yourself in a negative space without examining it, without moving forward, without learning, then there are repercussions from that can only be negative. It cannot be positive. There's no positive energy in that space.
Right.
So it's an interesting, and this comes up for me right now because this is what's going on right now. There's more and more voices are getting louder and louder. Doesn't mean they're making more sense. It
Oh,
means they're getting louder.
yeah.
And typically people get loud when they don't have logic, reasoning, or conviction of their own beliefs behind them. So they get loud to cover it up.
Yeah. You know
Think
what?
of the bully. Think of the
Yes.
bully who covers their insecurity
Mhm.
by being a jerk, right? That's and a funny sort of example too is I have been in the fitness world for a long time, and when I
Right.
lived in Asia, I
Mhm.
used to go to the Asia Fitness Convention, and I knew a number of bodybuilders and men and women, but mostly guys, and they were huge. Like, one guy could barely bend his
Yeah.
arm; his
Mhm.
muscles were so massive, and he was an absolute teddy bear. His wife was this one particular guy I'm thinking of. His wife was like 4'10" or something,
Right.
and if she said jump, he would be saying, "Yes, dear, how high?" And yet he's this massive bodybuilder.
Mhm.
And when I talked to him, I discovered that this guy is actually very shy, very sensitive, and really doesn't want to be seen in his shyness and sensitivity.
Mhm.
So he hides it behind these big bulky muscles. And people who have never spoken to him think, whoa, that's a scary dude. Look at him. He's
Yeah.
so huge. And actually, I'm way more ferocious than he would ever be. So, it's so interesting how we cover up things
Yeah. That's true.
by being the opposite. So people who really don't know what they're talking about get very loud and vociferous about it. And people who have more of an idea and know that they don't know enough tend to be quieter, which is kind of a problem, I
Yeah.
feel.
Well, that's true because as as it goes, right? The more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly.
So,
And you have to get comfortable with that too and be able to say, you know what, I don't know. And that's it's so interesting when people learn to do that because it becomes very freeing. It's like, well,
well,
actually, great question. I don't know.
yeah, it is, and it is actually fun to go on that journey of discovering something you don't know, and especially if someone is there with you. It's actually the one thing I like interacting with kids is the when they don't know an answer to something, you're like, "Oh, okay, well, that's great. Let's figure it out." You know, one, I do it because I want the child to assimilate the information, right, through their own efforts. Even if I know the answer, a lot of times they'll be like, "Ah, come on, we'll go explore and see what you learn." Because what I've learned doing that is there's things I didn't know. So,
Kids will find all kinds of stuff, and their perspective is so interesting because it's not colored yet by
mhm,
other people's opinions, hopefully. If you can get
right.
them that early, it can be so cool.
Hmm.
And there's so much potential there. You know, I've had a very varied career, and one of the things I've done is taught Montessori school.
Hmm.
So teaching kids in that kind of environment where you follow the child and see what they're interested in and see how they want to dive into that is so fascinating in and of itself. And your job is simply to facilitate that, give them all
Right.
the things they need and then watch them go, you
Hmm.
know, and see how they learn stuff and hear what they're going to tell you they get from what they've just been doing. It's very hands-on, right?
Right.
And then when I taught in a regular school, it was preschool, so teach is a word I'm using fairly loosely here.
Mm.
But when I was in this environment, I noticed that the kids were very stiff little bodies, like they
Hmm.
weren't very comfortable in their bodies. So I persuaded my co-teacher to change circle time to dance time,
Okay.
music, right? And it wasn't kids' music. We were playing like Michael Jackson, Nelly
Hmm.
Furtado, yeah,
Hmm.
stuff, Ricky Martin, stuff you could
Right.
really shake your booty to.
Right.
And these little kids, at first, they really didn't know how to move, most of them, and it was really awkward. And then they kind of got into it and they listened to the music. And what happened was, as time went on and we kept doing these circles,
Hmm.
first of all, other teachers would come in with their cups of coffee for their coffee break to watch
Right.
circle time because it was so entertaining
Yeah.
and such a cool space.
Hmm.
But what I noticed was after that experience, the kids were so much more open
Hmm.
to trying something they hadn't tried before, doing something differently. And I remember, I just have this image of this one little girl who was painting at an easel and
Right.
she was singing to herself and dancing. And she
Right.
was painting and she was just living her happiest life in that moment. But the music and the movement kind of shifted the perception to a more open space where they were just ready for more.
Yeah.
And it hadn't honestly been my intention in the first place. I just wanted them to learn how to be in their bodies.
Right.
And it bothered me that little kids were so stiff. But the bonus was, wow, look at them blossom. You know, it's like watering a plant and seeing the flower come up. Just that was what they needed.
Well, yeah,
So
it's like I did this with my older nieces and nephews when they were younger. I used to make them like I would like send them running around. My sister's ex-husband used to hate it. He goes, "Why do you make them run around and scream and stuff?" I'm like, "Well, I don't make them scream. That's just their happiness." But I said, one, I said, by the end of the day, they're tired and they're going to get the sleep they need. So we can actually hang out as adults. That's one of the big ones. I said, but that's how kids develop their joy in life and how they learn from the world around them. So if I keep them active and keep them doing things, you're gonna have pretty good kids at the end, you know.
it
But
opens up.
yeah,
It opens up the field of possibilities. It opens up their attention span to be able to see more things. It
right.
literally, flow is happening for these kids when they move.
Mhm.
You know, I don't even
Yes.
know how I got into the whole movement piece, but it seemed important, so it came up.
Well,
Um,
it was because it is as an adult, right? Like I said, I went through burnout, and part of the time when I was going through burnout, I didn't go dancing or do anything like that. And then I had gone dancing again after like years of not dancing. I didn't even know I was that stiff. Like I
right?
didn't even realize I was that stiff. But like dancing was brutal. I was like, I my body used to move. Like, what's going on here?
Uh-huh. You know, I had a client a little while back. She was 82 and had a number of complaints,
Hmm.
some of which were involving being on her own and tendency to depression and so on. So the
Right.
first thing I had her do was a morning routine where she wakes up, has some sips of water, not too much because we don't want to get, upset stomach and so
Right.
on. So not too much to start with, because what I wanted her to do before she drank any more
Hmm.
was put her favorite music on and start dancing and move however you want to move. Doesn't matter. You. Nobody's judging,
Hmm.
and see how you feel. And her depression improved significantly because the type of depression she had could be improved this way. So
Right.
the dancing and the movement and the music, it brightened her outlook for the rest of the day and improved her decision making. And this is the difference between going that route or following the whole shouty, angry route
Hmm.
and spouting other people what other people have told you. You know, there's a world of difference between those two outcomes, but the same individual can choose.
Hmm.
Do I want to put music on, dance, and make better decisions, or do I want to go with the guru shouty shouty? You
Yeah.
know, and that's an option every single day.
Yeah, it is. It's actually, although, like I said, when I was burning out, I kind of isolated myself from my body. But one of my practices was doing a walking meditation where I would, you know, again with the elements there, as I'm pointing to the background again, and I would go out. Okay, I'm going to walk as water today, or I'm going to walk as earth, or I'm going to walk as fire, or I'm going to walk as air, and it made a difference in my movement. And as a method of moving, fire is way different from earth, right? Most people, like, I'll run people through an exercise. Actually, it's funny when I was showing people my whole method, I would have them walk for in a circle. The intention was an hour, but it usually ended up being 2 hours because you get so into it. And then I would just have them switch to the different elements, and you can see most people when you said fire, they ran.
Hmm.
They just suddenly had a lot of energy, and they would start running instead of walking. And then if I told them to do air, they would start jumping. Now, earth was pretty funny. Some people would either have a really like a bold stance when they walk, they can walk with purpose, or they would lie on the ground.
Hmm.
I said, do whatever you feel you need to do. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. This is how you relate to it. So for some people, they're like, well, can I lay on the ground? I'm like, absolutely, go ahead. If that's how you feel you need to do it, that's how you do it, right? To give your body the sense of it, to give your body something to focus on. So it's interesting to do, and you'll see like when people do water, a lot of times they'll start to move with their whole body. Like
Hmm.
they'll move, like their arms won't just be swinging to the side. They'll like start to move like they're dancing. So it was
Yeah.
interesting to walk people through it, and so I would do that because like your brain maps your body, but if you don't do certain movements, your brain forgets that mapping, and you start to become clumsy. So I would do that kind of meditation, and then so I get all these different movements in. I mean, I start doing it again, but I forgot how much actually I enjoyed it because you get to re-know your body again. But it was
Yeah.
interesting, and there was a point in there somewhere, but I lost it. I know there was something about your mind has to trust you. That's how it maps, and then it trusts you. Someone was actually sharing me they had started working out a couple of years ago, and I was asking them how it was going. Like you can see the results, like, but I was asking them how it was going for them. And they said, I have more mobility now. And I'm like, oh. I said, well, it says, it's a side effect of showing your body that you can do stuff. The more your body trusts you, the more it'll allow you to do. So the more you move, the more you stretch, the more your body will trust you to stretch. The more you lift things, the more your body will trust you to lift things, and it'll give you more resources to your. You know what? I guess we're just throwing wisdom in here, like
Yeah.
make it different, whatever needs.
Well, one of the things I think kids got from that whole circle time becoming, instead of sitting down listening to
Mhm.
stories, we get up and dance,
Yeah.
which was so much fun for us teachers
Mhm.
too. Like, because you can totally bet I was in there dancing too.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, showing them some things to do because they looked a bit lost, right?
Right.
So giving them some movements. But what it also did was it gave them a different awareness of themselves in space.
Hmm.
Their spatial awareness and how much room they take up and can take up
Yeah.
shifted significantly. And I think I'm going to say for the girls in particular, this was important, but honestly, I think all of the kids needed it and will have benefited from that moving forward because it was so young when they learned this.
Hmm.
And I would love for people to do this as a practice with their own kids and for themselves also. Like you can still do it
Hmm.
as an adult, like
Yeah.
totally do what I told my 82-year-old to do. Put the music on, whatever you like. It doesn't matter and move however you want. It doesn't matter. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's
Right.
just getting in tune with something and going with it, which is another
Hmm.
kind of flow, right? You're
Right.
going to get into that and just roll with that. And are you going to play something that's uplifting? and inspiring, or are you going to play something that you can shout to, you know?
Mhm.
And it just depends. Where is your need today? But move to it as well. And
Yeah.
that, in a way, you could be doing the elements to that.
Hmm. Well, that's
You
the thing,
use
right?
the music for the elements.
Yeah. I was gonna say part of the fun part of running other people through it is watching which elements they like the most because you can start to see them. You'll see smiles come on their face, right? Because they start moving like the element. You can see it's natural to them to move that way, and it's pretty interesting. It's one of the reasons why it ends up being 2 hours long is because I'm getting amusement out of it. I do other things, right? But it's like the watching people move through their, and then I have them, interact with their environment the same way just to see how it all works. And
Hmm.
it's interesting to see people like because you do see the smiles come on their face when they hit the elements they really like and they move in that way. But there's differences a lot of times, and then there's actually this is my sister will love this story. So I've got a cousin now who he's a master now in martial arts, like in his style. But when he had just turned black belt at the time. But I was trying to find different ways to make people move using these elements, right? So I thought, well, I have a background in martial arts, right? And so we'll use martial arts to see how it works. And so I would have him attack her, and she'd have to protect herself or do attacks depending on what it was. And she was pretty hilarious. One of her defenses was when I said do water, she just fell to the ground like a puddle. So when he went to do his punch, it was like she was nowhere near to be hit, right? But then when I said defend as air, she blew in his face, which totally threw him off. But I'm like, well,
Then it worked.
I'm like, it worked. See, your instincts, like you used because when you give someone a focus, they can now put all their energy into what they're focusing on, right? So when I said the element of air, well, the first thing came to her mind, because she doesn't have a martial arts background, was to blow in his face or to drop. But the most interesting one was when I told her to do earth, because earth is her strongest connection. It actually looked like she had done martial arts training because she dropped down into a solid stance and deflected his punch upwards with the palm of her hand. So it actually looked like she had done martial arts. And I'm like,
Interesting.
yeah. So you start like again, right? You're showing your sorry, you're giving your body a limited number of options to work with. It's like the practice of actually I don't know in your like in your experience, have you ever worked with magical personality? Having like adopting a magical personality for your practice?
I'm just gonna have to ponder that for a minute. No, I don't think so.
Like, because the idea, right? You adopt a personality and then makes it it kind of keeps you focused on what you're doing. Like,
No, I'm typically if I had to pick a hat to put on, so to
mm,
speak, it would be perpetually curious. And so
mm,
I'm always like the curious child. What
mm,
happens when I do this? And this I want to play in the water now, or I want
mm,
to play over here now. And so I'll go with what feels right. So it's not so much about a personality as what I'm communing with, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because I like to play with it though. One of the things I used to do when I was teaching people the elemental form of meditation was the making a personification for each element.
Mm,
And then you pretend to be that personification when you went out for a walk and then see how it affected them and what they did and how they answered things. It was pretty amusing when I first came up with it when I would do it for fire because I would use it for everything, right? I'm like, okay, I'm taking a nap. I'm going to nap as fire. And you might imagine fire didn't want to nap. So,
right.
so I'm lying there, my arms are moving, and I can see him like, and I'm picturing the character I used for fire. And it's like, you can see the anger on the face, well, I'm not gonna lie here. So it's moving his arms around, and I'm like, okay, this is obviously not the element for napping.
Right.
But then
I
it's
think it would
funny.
be interesting to have a conversation from that perspective. But I mean, the person you're talking to would need to know that
Yeah,
that's
what
what you
you're
were
doing.
doing.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they'd be backing away slowly, or maybe fairly
yeah.
quickly. But
Well, and it's interesting because especially the personification for Earth was more of a bit more what would you call it? Boisterous. It would almost be like what you expect like a college athlete to be like, you know, especially when like the that cult of personality around them. So they're always like seeking attention. And for those who do seek attention, right? It was that
Right.
kind of character. I don't know why that came, but it was pretty funny. So I was like thinking of like, okay, there's you can put your energy towards action or you can put your energy to being calm. And I said, okay, figuring it's Earth, right? Calm should come natural, right? Although that's not true even in reality because the Earth reacts all the time. And then the character would be like, no, I want to go out and do stuff. Like, because when I would use that personification, like he's like stomping around, like, like as if I owned the place. I said, well, you're gonna, I named that personification Tharg the Unstoppable. And I said, okay, I says, but now we're going to use you for trying to be introspective and see where that brings me. And then, much like with Fire not wanting to nap, Earth didn't want to sit down. I said, well, listen, part of this exercise is that I need to know how I can use Earth in this way. So, kind of in a pouty child sort of way, goes, okay, well, I'm not Tharg the Unstoppable or Tharg the Unmovable or Tharg the Unstoppable. I'm now Tharg the Unmovable. And so now when I meditated using Earth, it was like the perfect stillness because, like, well, then if I'm Earth, I'm not moving. I'm like a stone, I'm not moving. I'm sitting here. Unless something really powerful comes and moves me, I'm not moving. So it was
Hmm.
interesting. So that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, so I use the little personification. Like in the beginning, I don't use them anymore because now I've got a good handle on how I interact with the elements as a metaphor for my meditation. But at that time, I would do personifications, and it was really interesting. Like, so Fire didn't want to calm down. So Fire, because the same thing. When I said, okay, well, I need something for sitting down and meditating. So what are you going to give me, Fire? And Fire didn't want to do anything either. I said, well, okay, what can you give me from the perspective of, your more intellectual perspective? And it goes, okay, I'm going to give you this. I burn away lies. And that brought me on an interesting journey. Even like if I went grocery shopping, if I wanted to buy something that I knew it wasn't healthy for me, but I had a craving or something, and I was thinking, no, I'll just buy it, no big deal. I could not. I couldn't even go where they were because I was using the personification that I was using for Fire to see how it would help me make decisions. And it's like, okay, you're avoiding that place, you're avoiding that place, you're avoiding that place. None of those things are good for you, so you're not having it. So I'm like,
Interesting.
okay, yeah. I'm like, well, I told you to give me something, and you burn away lies. Okay, perfect.
Well, that can be very useful whenever you need it, right?
So I still use it that way actually. When I'm like stuck on something and I'm wondering, am I deceiving myself or am I not clear on this? How do I get to a
Hmm.
clear thing? And then I'll just kind of focus on Fire. I'm like, okay, this is your job. This is what you do for me. You burn away the lies, so let's go. And
That
then you
is
come
something.
to
I think that practice is something that as many people as possible, as many people as are ready,
mm,
would benefit from including something in there where they don't lie to themselves. Because we all do it. It's a skill set that you're almost born with, right? It's one of the things that you do to trick yourself into doing something that your rational brain would say, "What are you nuts?"
there's a
Well,
survival component to it,
right.
but it can't be there all the time. Is the only thing.
It's
We rely on it too much a lot of times.
it's good to know when you're really just tricking yourself because
Hmm.
it's easier that way,
Right.
or because it's secondary gain,
Yeah.
and you just really want that thing, so you're going to rationalize it. And human beings are great at doing that if
Hmm.
they need to. I mean, ask anybody that's trying not to eat chocolate, and they'll give you the best. Excuse me, they'll give you the best rationalizations ever as to why they're going to buy that chocolate. So
Yeah.
you know, it can be really interesting. In fact, one of my clients right now, we're having this journey through WildFit
Right.
of she's rationalizing an awful lot on why she doesn't need to do the things that she's being asked to
Right.
try.
Hmm.
She's interesting because it's her second go through. So it's like, well, you knew this was coming, so why are we having
Yeah.
this big issue and denial and da da da, and that's where the work is, right? That's where the good stuff is, but
Yeah.
it's a lot. And sometimes, if she was able to ask herself, why am I doing this, half the work would be done. easily because she gets some insights into why she's sort of resisting. Why is she fighting on this and then this and then this? Like, what's that all about? What's the end goal?
Right.
And that's I think we can all benefit from asking ourselves that, like, why do I keep doing that? What's the point? What am I looking for here? And then when the stuff that sounds good comes up, okay, but what am I really looking for here? You know,
Yeah.
'cause we all know how to say the thing, right? That somebody else wants to hear or that you would love to believe. And then what is it really?
Hmm. That's yeah, the ability to be true with yourself. Like we all are to a degree or another. We know we're lying to ourselves. It was one of I had a conversation before. I'm like, people aren't as deceived as often as you might think they're deceived, right? I was talking to someone. I'm saying like, because the person was like, how come people fall for deception so easily? I'm like, they're not as deceived as you might think they are. They just it's easier to go with the deception than it is to stand up to the deception and go through all the steps necessary to expose the deception and deal with the consequences. So, you might be in a relationship, right? And someone constantly cheats on you and you're like, well, I won't do, or abusive relationship is a perfect example. Well, I'll never hit you. I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. You know full well it's coming again. But for where you are at your time, you allow yourself to believe that. You allow yourself to act like you believe that lie when you know you don't, but you accept it because for whatever reason, where you are, you need that, for lack of a better way of expressing that.
Yeah, I think what often happens in particularly in situations like that is self-esteem is taking a hit,
Mhm.
literally, and self-efficacy, the
Right.
belief that you can do things is down. So all the things you need to be up and active are
Mhm.
actually squashed. And so the person stays trying to believe that
Mhm.
staying is going to work until they simply can't anymore.
Right.
And then the deal from there is to learn what happened. Why was I there, and
Mhm.
what was that whole deal? What did I learn? What can I learn? What would I like to learn so that you don't have to do it again?
Right.
Because that's that repeat pattern, right? And that can be for any situation in life, any behavior in life. Like, here's another one that just leapt to mind. If you're somebody who changes jobs a lot,
Mhm.
right? So here's the news flash. It's not the job. It's you, because you're the common denominator. So
Mhm.
what is it about you that's problematic in that workplace? And are you choosing the wrong kind of job for you? Are you oppositional and you're having a problem with having a boss? Is it a particular type of boss? Is it the level of work you're doing? Like, what is the issue that's not going to change by moving to another job? Because it's something about how you show up. It's something about your perception of how this needs to go. And not lying to yourself and not taking the easy route of saying, God, all these bosses are such jerks,
Mhm.
or I've worked at companies where there's a high turnover, for example, and typically, as staff are going out the door as fast as they can, the owners of the company are going to say things like, "You just can't get good people to work these
Mhm.
days. Nobody wants to work these days. What's wrong with these people? Nobody appreciates the job they get."
Yeah.
Well, actually, in this particular case, you're the common denominator,
Yeah.
and it's the work environment is toxic, for whatever reason. And typically, they know what the problem is, but it's a lot easier to just bring more people
Right.
in and to keep saying, to keep blaming. So this is a case of willful lying to yourself, if you
Mhm.
will. Um, and it happens a lot. So using the job
Right.
example, I think will land for somebody listening because somebody's done that and didn't
Yeah.
realize that that's what they were doing. They genuinely thought it was the job and the next job will be better. But that's not necessarily the case.
No. That's true. Well, it's funny because it makes me think of the difference between an adult employee and someone newly starting into the workforce, usually a young employee. The older employee will not put up with more, but they'll deal with stuff easier without being as tired by the situation because they know it needs to be done and they understand why it needs to be done and they don't have the baggage of fighting the authority figure that you have when you're young. I don't want to call it baggage, but you have an imperative to strike out and learn your own values and your own ways of doing things. So when you get into a job, right, and you're being told what to do and no one really cares about your opinion for the really first time, the adult that you're with doesn't couldn't care less about what you're doing. They pay you, you're compensated for being there. So you have a harder time adjusting to employment than someone who's been in the field and knows, okay, they're paying me. Yeah, we have the compensation. Their business, they want to run it that way. That's fine. That's up to them. As long as they compensate me. That difference, when you're young, you don't have that nuance yet at your job, but when you're old, you do have that experience.
I think expectations can be
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
different as well. And the young person has potentially greater expectations. They're just looking for more from the workplace. And when they
Mm-hmm.
don't get it, they are dissatisfied and feel that there ought to be more. And frankly, they're probably right. There ought to be more, but there isn't going to be.
Right.
So the question then is, what are you going to do about it? But you got to know that the issue is yours. So that's good news and bad news, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the bad news is you don't get to blame everybody else. But the good news is you get to take responsibility and control over how you respond to that, which is where your power is.
Yeah.
So that's where the growth is, that's where the power is, that's where the choice is. So that it's not all bad, but you do have to be able to look at your reflection honestly and say, yeah, it's me. I don't do well here. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
And then decide, are you just shooting for the wrong thing? Are do you need to be somewhere completely different?
Yeah.
Why are you shooting for that particular job? Is it because other people told you to? Because
More
we're
than
right
likely.
back to the whole influence
Yeah.
and other people's opinions, right? But what do they know? And an example that I love is a distant cousin of mine. I remember when he was going through school, he wanted to be a truck driver.
Right.
Like he wanted to be a long distance truck driver, and his parents were not having it. That was not the deal.
Mm-hmm.
So he ended up going to university, getting an engineering degree, which is what they wanted him to do. He got his engineering degree, and the day he had his convocation and he got his paper, he handed it to his mom and he said, "There you go. Now I'm off to be a truck driver." And he literally he got him, he already had it lined up. He had a job as a long distance truck driver, and he did that for a number of years before deciding, okay, I don't need to keep doing this now. And it was good that he had the engineering degree because he was able to put it to some use.
Yeah.
But it just, it's one of those things where if he tried to do engineering from the get-go, it would have been awful, and there'd be
Right.
bridges falling down all over the place because
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't in that headspace and didn't want to do that. And he would never have found a good boss because he it wasn't where he needed to be. And sometimes where you need to be isn't what other people think for you. His family had a lot of stories about, it's not good to be a truck driver. Like we would all be in trouble if we didn't have truck drivers. So let me just say
Well,
we need truck drivers and
yes.
plumbers and electricians and all those things. But they wanted him to have this level of career that he didn't want.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
mm-hmm.
who's right and who's wrong on that one?
Right.
I'm going to say he's right because it's his life.
Yeah. And it's you bring that up and it made me think. Actually, made me think two things. One was humorous. It was I'll just get it out of the way. So I don't know if you've ever watched Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yep.
Well, there was that they were on that was it a planet, and they were all genetically modified for their job. And one of the arguments for it was, you know, you might have something tragic like a poet digging ditches, Or even more tragically, you might have a ditch digger writing poetry.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
But it made me think of like, there's a lot of jobs we don't think are important because they don't give you status. And yet, if they're not done, you know, society falls apart.
I have always felt that
Mm,
the status given to particular jobs
mm,
is wildly inaccurate
mm.
and not at all reflective of reality,
Right.
right? Because if you need a plumber, you sure as hell don't want a poet laureate walking through the door
That's right.
because that is not going to help the
Mm,
situation. And if nobody's trained to do these things, then we're all stuck. So, talk about the person in the supermarket who's running your stuff through the
mm.
till, assuming they don't have the self checkout thing, which
Right.
I'm not a fan of.
No, neither am I.
But if you've got that person there, well, you can have your transaction completed. You can get things done. You got somebody stocking the shelves. Yay, you've got food. And
Yeah.
hey, during COVID, you got toilet paper. You know,
Yeah.
there's all these things that we have to have, all these facets. So why view one as being less than another? And typically in society, we have the less practical it is, the greater the status,
Well,
right?
it's funny because I think of the expression, and yeah, there was the song by Pink Floyd, but that I'm just another brick in the wall, another cog in the machine. Well, that might be replaceable and that might give it less status. But if you don't have that cog and you don't have that brick, your wall's not whole and your machine's not working.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so if that cog goes missing, until it's replaced, you're not doing anything. So it may seem insignificant, but it's significant once you lose it. So, and COVID was a good example, right? Our supposed
Yeah.
heroes until COVID was over, but the front line, the people doing the cash, the people running fast food places,
Right.
those were like people are like those are jobs that people are crying for. They shouldn't have, a livable wage, and it's like, listen, during the pandemic, if not for these people, we had all would have been hosed.
Right. And
And they
there's
had to be
typically
there, and they had
and
to
there's
risk their
typically an
lives.
argument of, you shouldn't pay people who flip burgers that much.
Mm.
No? Well, don't go buy the burgers then.
Yeah,
Like, are you okay to not have the burgers? If that's fine for you, then, at least your argument is congruent with your
right, with your values that
lifestyle.
you
But
actually show. Yeah.
still, how do you value one person who's showing up for work differently to another person who's showing up for work?
Mm.
If the jobs aren't there, then it's a different thing. But yeah, it's we as humans, we really do some wacky stuff when it
Mhm.
comes to what's worth money and what isn't. And to bring it full circle, because we don't have that much time left, but to bring it full circle, I have found that people who work in the spiritual realm,
Mhm.
whether it's in a magical inclination, energy healing, human design, any of these things, will often have someone somewhere who says, well, if you're so spiritual, why are you charging money for this?
Yeah,
And it's like, I am spiritual. I'm also in a physical body that
yeah,
needs to be fed and housed and clothed. And, we have all these things.
yeah,
But it's such an interesting concept that because you're spiritual, you shouldn't
mm,
charge money.
yeah,
And as money is energy, I'm like, really, if anybody should be charging money, it's somebody who's spiritual because
well,
you need that energy exchange.
yeah,
So it's a balance. But what an interesting concept that, well, what you're doing, I'm here for it. That's why we're
mhm,
having this conversation,
yeah,
but I shouldn't have to pay for it.
yeah. That's the
Oops. Isn't that interesting? And yet,
yeah,
ask any of the mega churches about
mm,
their coffers and their lack of paying taxes, and let's see who gets paid what. It's such doesn't make sense.
yeah. It's interesting. Now, mind you, churches are supposed to be doing charitable works, so that's why
Uh-huh.
they get the tax exemption.
Uh-huh.
Supposed to be taking that money and reinvesting it, but
Uh-huh.
not into their pockets.
Well, the
Yeah,
supposed to's is there's an awful lot of supposed to's and the whole lot of not happenings.
yeah,
Um, And that's evidence all over the place. I'm not saying anything that's not out there.
Yeah,
Easy to find on Google.
yeah. I'm just
Um,
saying that to throw a bone to the people who who might want to be contrarian. It's like, okay, well, but there's interestingly, a physicist of all people thinks that people should charge for their spiritual work because
yeah.
he was doing experiments on it and he was trying to figure out like what leads to channeling and all that kind of stuff. And he what he found is that there's when people are channeling, like when they're contacting the divine, there's a signal, a readable signal.
Mhm.
He says, and he noticed because at the time he was dating a woman who was a psychic who did reading. She was a medium, so he would use her sessions for to get data, and he found that he could see when she hesitated, there was no signal. But then she would start talking again when the signal would reestablish itself. But he told her, because she didn't charge, or she charged very little. He told her, he says, no. He says, I see the wear and tear on your body. He
Mhm.
says, you should be charging way more than you're charging. So this is a physicist telling people, you should charge.
And honestly, if you expect to receive something,
Mm-hmm.
then you should expect to hand over some money for it because that is the currency of the planet, and
Yeah.
that's how we operate in this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very disappointing to me when somebody says, "Oh, you don't." I had somebody ask me if they could have a 90 days of Wild Fit for free.
Right.
And I was like, no, that's not how it works. But also, even if I had said yes,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, that costs me, so I'm in a
Well,
negative
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But also, she would not show up because, if I said to you, okay, Danielle, I'm gonna offer you some coaching, and it's gonna be brilliant coaching, life changing. It's gonna cost you $10,000 a month, and you're gonna say, "Whoa, I'm here for that." Like
Right.
that's going to be incredible. I know you're really good here. I'm going to make that happen. And you might take bonds out or,
Right.
your retirement fund or whatever it is, but you would find a way, right? And you give
Mm-hmm.
me that money and you would show up, pen and paper or
Right.
computer in hand, and every word I said would be noted by you, and you would get gold out of that. You would
Yeah.
get benefit from it because you're looking for it and you're here to receive it. Now, exact same situation, exact same coaching. Danielle, I'm going to coach you and it's going to cost you $50 a month. The energy just went
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and and kind of flubbed on the floor, and you might not even remember to show up for a session. You might just
Yeah.
I need to go shopping. I think I'll go shopping first. It's not a big deal. I'll see you next week. And it becomes unimportant.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do show up, you're not really expecting much. So guess what you find? Not a lot, because that's
Right.
what you're looking for, is not a lot. So it's actually important to allow the other person to receive by charging the appropriate amount.
Right. That's yeah. Because
It's
you
energy exchange, and you
yeah,
can't receive it if you're not showing up. You can't show up if you're not invested.
it's
It
absolutely
simply
true.
works that way.
Yeah. And
Did
it's
you
interesting.
feel a difference in your body when I said $10,000 and
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
$50?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
10,000 kind of
10,000 is
makes you
like
sit
I'm
up.
there every day. Yeah. I
But
want to be in it. Yeah.
10,000, you're sitting up and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
we are going here and I am going to
Yeah.
get major results. And
Mm-hmm.
what? And the enthusiasm is the element of fire, right? You are
Yeah.
dancing with fire at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how that all, the minute you put something serious, like I'll refer to a TV show actually, it was pretty funny. It was Steven Spielberg's, he had made it. I don't know if it was called Amazing Stories or something. Anyway, there was a story where the guy was a faith healer or was a healer. He had a magical gem that let him heal people. And the one session he was doing, there was a panel of people trying to see if he was legit or not. And so he'd go out and that part's not really as important as how he did it, but there was a doctor there and he said, well, if you fail, do you give your money back? that's not the important part either. The important part is he charged people no matter what they like, what their income was. He charged a percentage of their income, and it was usually enough that it really, really, really hurt. And it didn't matter if you were rich or poor. If you were
Uh-huh.
poor, it was the same. Like it was still like it hurt you to do it. Like this will cost you for like a year of like you'll be scrimping and saving. And it was whether someone was poor or rich, it was the same thing.
Uh-huh.
And when the doctor asked him why he charged that much, he said, "Well, people need to be serious about what they want to do. They need to have their soul in this. So if
Mhm.
you're risking your financial well-being to get this, because it was a miraculous healing, right? And it was for things that other people couldn't fix. So he says, do you think if they come to me and it doesn't cost them anything that their soul will be in this? No, if they come to potential harm to have to pay me, then their focus is on the healing. It's not on, they're not going to walk away and not care. They're going to be focused, just like you said. If you
Oh,
cost
they're
it
invested.
costs you 10,000 versus 50.
Uh-huh. You show up really differently. You can feel it in your body. If you just think genuinely, you're about to hand me $10,000 for a month
Mm.
of coaching, right?
Yeah,
Woo, that feels like, that's quite the electrical charge.
yeah.
And then if I say $50, that energy just kind of went down to the
Yeah.
light of a matchstick. It just wasn't such a big
Yeah.
deal. And that is representative of why spiritual people need to charge for what they do. It cannot be received if it's not adequately charged for.
Right.
So you're
That's
doing the person who's on the other side a disservice if you don't charge. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. It genuinely isn't about the money, it's about the energy exchange. And
mhm,
you have to be able to do that. And the other thing that I want to add to that is a coach once said to me in
mhm,
my early stages, you're very concerned about how much people can afford. And what's in somebody else's wallet is none of your damn business. So you mind your business and you charge
mhm,
what you feel it's worth, what you are congruent with charging, and never mind their business about what's in their wallet. They will figure that out. And I needed that sort of separation of what was my business and what wasn't,
mhm,
because I was coming from the space of working as a board certified behavior analyst
mhm.
with families with kids with autism. And I
Yeah.
always felt, well, they've got enough going on. I can't really ask them for money as well.
Mhm,
And that was exactly the wrong energy to be bringing to it. Totally the wrong energy. And it's also very judgmental of me to have that whole set of expectations that they couldn't handle
yeah.
being as well. So a big life lesson, big thing to learn.
And and it's interesting because you brought up some that you made me think. Like I used to work in where we used to do family therapy. I did the computers, but I would listen to the therapist, and people would bring them gifts because this was a non. Sorry, it was a non for profit. So not everyone getting therapy was paying. It was either paid by something else, or sometimes it would be out of pocket. But the people who couldn't pay out of pocket would always be bringing them gifts. You know, like they'd make them some dessert, or they would make them something for supper, or some any kind of food thing, or they anything they could put together to bring them as a gift. They would bring it, and they were like, it's unfortunate because we really can't accept them. It goes against our,
Yeah.
our ethics in our for our job. But I thought, but and I said to them, I said, but this is their only way of giving back for what you've done to
Yes.
them,
And
for
I
them.
spent an entire semester arguing with my professor over this exact thing because you'd go into someone's house and they might want to make you a coffee and we weren't supposed to accept the coffee. And it's like, well, okay, so ethically, you don't want us to accept any kind of payment, even a cup of coffee. But if the family are making coffee anyway and they just want to include you, and it's culturally a thing that they want you to have something, should you not go with that? And I remember this prof saying to me, well, would you, if somebody comes to do your plumbing in your house, are you going to give them something? And I was like, hell yes, every time. We keep chickens, so nobody leaves our house without a dozen eggs. And
Yeah.
of course, I'm going to offer tea, coffee, or some
Mhm.
kind of soft drink, naturally.
Yeah.
Don't you want the person to do a good job in your house? Of course you're going to give them stuff. And he just looked at me like I had three heads and he didn't know which one to talk to. And it was fascinating. But yes, you need that exchange
Yeah, it's
always.
natural human behavior. You're creating a circuit basically. You're creating a spiritual circuit
Yes,
or a social
it is a
circuit.
circuit.
So it
It
needs
is
to
a
be able to
circuit.
circle around. Yeah.
And you need that. And if a person is in the energy of I want to take from you, I want to take from you, but I have nothing to give you, then it's not going to work well for them. They're not in the right space to accept this. Just like a broken circuit isn't going to light up anything.
Right.
You know, it's just you have to have that even flow happening.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that's listening to this, if you're still listening, first of all, kudos, because we've been going a while.
Yeah.
And then secondly, yes, you can charge. And yes, you should charge. And if you're stuck on deciding how much, the first thing to ask yourself is, would I pay me this? And if you think it's reasonable enough that you would pay you, because you know how good a coach you are,
Right.
if you would pay you that, then you're in a good space. And I think that's a good place to wrap up. I don't know about
Yeah.
you.
Well, I was just thinking that myself. This is because I completely agree because this is a good idea to end on is the exchanging things for help, especially in the spiritual mystical sense, is perfectly natural to give money in return or something in return for that service you're getting.
Oh,
So,
one more thing I wanted to add, which was the story that you had about the doctor asking the healer.
mhm,
The
right.
healer, my thoughts immediately went to turning to the doctor and saying, do you? Like, do
Yeah.
you give the money back to the insurance
Yes.
companies or wherever when what you offer doesn't work?
Hmm.
Because of course they don't. It's not for you're not paying for success per se, because the success isn't up to the person who's offering the service. The success is up to the recipient.
Hmm.
And it's your responsibility. So again, you have to show up for that and complete that circuit.
That's right. That's why you include them. That's why you charge them so that they're involved.
Right.
Otherwise, they're just receiving and they're not doing anything in that particular
Yeah,
interaction.
they cannot receive if the
Right.
door is closed because they haven't energetically opened it.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that is a good place to end. So
Yeah.
very good, Mikhail. All right. So for everyone listening, okay, we need an assignment before we get out of here. So the assignment is think about situations in your life where you didn't complete that circuit, that energy circuit of doing something for someone and then allowing them to give back to you. And think about that and how you felt and how your interactions with that person were later. I think that's a good assignment for this one because a lot of people will probably think back and go, oh, yeah, sometimes our relationship was a little bit more difficult after that.
Right. Because if you're not showing up, if that exchange isn't equal, then resentment kicks in and you
Yeah,
can't get progress with resentment.
and that's right. Okay, and now we will end it. So until next time, I'm Daniel Dubois.
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone. And we're so glad you're listening to us. Thank you.